The night the fort heard footsteps began in the kind of silence that makes a man remember sins he swore he'd buried. The wind had stopped, dead still, and Private Eamon Pike woke to the sound of someone walking above his bunk, each step slow, deliberate, as if testing the weight of the world. Captain Elias Ward, all bone and frost, told him it was just the timber settling. But the timbers didn't breathe. The timbers didn't whisper his name. When Sergeant Boone Merritt climbed the ladder to the roof, his lantern cast long shadows across the snow, and for a heartbeat, he swore he saw another set of footprints beside his own, ending in midair. By morning, frost had eaten into the hinges and Pike's eyes were red with sleepless dread. He kept insisting the roof had sagged beneath those steps. Ward ignored him, but Boone's silence said more than any denial. In the gray dawn, Nora watched the men gather near the ladder, their breath clouding like ghosts of their own. She felt something shift in the air, a stillness that didn't belong to winter. From the roof line, snow had fallen in a clean, perfect line, as if something had walked across and brushed it away. The morning meal went untouched. Steam rose from the tin cups like offerings to a god who no longer listened. Ward paced. Boone kept glancing toward the ceiling. Pike muttered prayers in a language none of them understood. Nora's eyes followed a draft moving through the cracks above the fire pit, the faint sound of boards creaking, like footsteps pacing once again, steady and slow. Later that day, Nora found little Sam staring at the ceiling. "He's walking again," he whispered. She told him no one was up there, but the boy pointed toward the rafters. "He is," he said softly, "but he's not heavy anymore." Outside, the wind had returned, carrying a hollow rhythm that almost matched the sound of boots. That night, Ward ordered the roof sealed, and no man to speak of what was heard. But silence has its own kind of echo. As the last lanterns dimmed, a sound rose again, faint, deliberate, closer. Boone held his breath. Pike began to weep, and Nora, standing by the fire, whispered the words none of them dared say aloud. "He's not outside anymore." By sunrise, the snow had stopped, but the world felt wrong, as if the storm had left something behind. Boone was first to see the tracks, 2 clean rows of boot prints pressed into the snow along the roof's edge, leading straight down the wall and ending in midair. No ladder, no drag marks, nothing human about it. Ward barked orders, demanded logic, but the wind itself seemed to hush him. Nora arrived with Sam at her side, her eyes tracing the prints until they vanished. "There's no weight in them," she murmured, and for the first time even Ward said nothing. Private Pike refused to come outside. He sat on his bunk clutching a small crucifix, whispering prayers in Irish. The men watched him from a distance. None dared mock him now. Ward stormed in, demanding courage, but his own voice quivered beneath the surface. Outside, the wind scraped across the palisade like fingernails. Boone closed the door quietly behind them, muttering, "Captain, it ain't the cold that's getting to him." Later, Nora ventured into the supply room to fetch rations and stopped dead. On the shelf where the spare uniforms and boots were kept, a single space lay empty. The tag beneath it still read, "Private H. Cormac, deceased." He'd died 2 winters ago, frozen on patrol, his boots buried with him. Nora reached out as if to touch the empty space, then drew back when the lamplight flickered, not from wind, but from breath. Boone and Ward stood over the grave that afternoon, a mound of snow-covered earth behind the fort's walls. The marker read, "Private Hugh Cormac, 1825–1846. Boone pressed a gloved hand into the drift and felt the cold bite through. "You think somebody dug him up?" he asked. Ward's eyes stayed on the grave. "No," he said quietly. "I think he dug himself out." That night, as the fort settled into restless silence, Nora tucked Sam into bed and turned toward the window. Beyond the glass, the roof shimmered faintly under starlight. Untouched, but for a single line of footprints that hadn't been there an hour ago. She whispered a prayer she hadn't used since childhood. Outside, the snow began to fall again, each flake landing soundless as the steps above resumed, slower this time, deliberate, waiting. The drawings started 2 nights after the prince reappeared. Nora found Sam crouched by the hearth, tracing black spirals into soot with his fingertips. When she asked what he was drawing, he only said, "The man from the roof. He's waiting for the fire to die." Boone saw them too, the marks curling like smoke up the stone. Ward ordered them scrubbed away, but by dawn, the spirals had returned. Larger, darker, almost pulsing in the lamplight. None of them spoke about the whisper that came with them, the one that said Sam's name. That evening, the fort's lanterns began to flicker as if caught in a wind that wasn't there. Pike refused to light his. He said the glow drew it closer. When Nora passed through the corridor, she saw a lone lantern burning in the watchtower. Though no one had been posted there, the flame bent sideways, like it was being pulled by something unseen. Boone climbed the tower to put the light out. Halfway up, the flame guttered, flared, then went cold, leaving him in blackness. His boots slipped on the frost, hand finding the rail just in time. But through the dark, he felt something brush his sleeve, like a hand without warmth or weight. He called down to Ward, voice breaking. From below, Ward swore he saw a figure standing beside Boone in the tower, motionless and tall. In the barracks, Nora tried to warm Sam's hands beside the fire. He stared into the flames, whispering that the man wasn't angry, only cold. When she asked how he knew, he smiled faintly. He said he used to sleep here. Sam answered. Ward overheard, the color draining from his face. "That's enough," he muttered. But even as he spoke, the boards above them creaked under invisible steps. Near midnight, the fort fell quiet except for the wind. Then came the sound again, boots pacing above, measured and heavy. But this time it didn't stay on the roof. From the watchtower, light flared bright white, blinding through the snow, and then vanished. When their eyes cleared, the prince led from the tower straight to the schoolroom door. Nora's lantern trembled in her hand as she opened it, and found Sam's soot drawings all over the walls, each one pulsing faintly as though alive. By the 4th night, no one slept. The wind outside had found a voice, low, drawn, almost human. Boone swore he heard it call his name. Pike refused to leave his bunk, whispering that the dead don't walk alone. Nora tried to pray, but every time she closed her eyes, she saw Sam's soot spirals turning. Ward paced the courtyard, rifle in hand, muttering the names of men long buried. When the whisper came again, it sounded like a sigh drawn through the cracks of the fort itself. At dawn, Nora confronted Ward in his quarters. She spoke of the child's drawings, of the voice that called from the wind, and demanded truth about the fort's past. Ward's silence was answer enough. "We built this place on graves," he said finally. "An old camp slaughtered in winter. We burned the ground, thinking it'd keep them quiet." Nora's face went pale. "And you buried them beneath us?" she asked. Ward's eyes flicked to the ceiling. "No," he whispered. "We built over them." Outside, Boone gathered the men near the gate, trying to keep order. Pike's hands shook too violently to load his rifle. The others stood silent, eyes drawn to the watchtower where a lantern burned, though none had lit it. The wind carried a voice now. Not words, but the rhythm of footsteps, circling, echoing across the walls. Boone's jaw clenched. "We stand the line," he said. "Whatever walks, it's still on our side of the gate." That evening, the footsteps came again. Heavier, faster, circling the roof above Ward's quarters. The sound of a man pacing in anger. Then, silence. Nora, listening from the hall, heard something else. A voice inside the room, low and sorrowful. She pushed open the door, and Ward was alone, staring at his desk. But the frost on the walls had shaped itself into a handprint. By midnight, the fort shook with the weight of unseen steps. Roof beams groaned, walls shuddered, and the wind screamed through the gaps like voices wailing. Ward stumbled into the yard, shouting into the storm, "What do you want from me?" The wind stopped. For one breathless moment, the world was still. Then from the blackness above came the answer, a whisper stretched thin by the cold. "Remember us." By morning, the wind had turned to a scream. Snow battered the fort until the gates themselves moaned beneath the weight. Ward ordered every man to his post. Boone moved through the storm, his lantern nearly snuffed by gusts, while Pike clung to the barracks door, eyes wide with dread. Inside, Nora tried to keep Sam calm, whispering stories of spring, fields, and rivers unfrozen. But Sam only asked one question, voice small and steady. "Why is he knocking?" Outside, the great timber gates shuddered again, as if someone pressed from the other side. The sound came again, not from above this time, but from the gate itself. Slow, deliberate strikes, each one deeper than the last. Boone and Ward forced the heavy beam across the doors, while snow blew in like smoke. Pike swore he saw a shadow between the slats, a figure in a soldier's coat, head bowed, one arm raised as if to knock again. Ward shouted for Boone to stand back, but the next blow splintered the wood clean through. Boone fired through the opening, once, twice, the flashes lighting the blizzard like lightning. When the smoke cleared, the shape was gone, but so was the sound. Pike began laughing, too loud, too desperate. Ward struck him silent. The gate hung half open, the snow inside stained gray where lead had struck. Nora rushed out, barefoot in the snow, searching for Sam, who had slipped from her arms during the gunfire. Only his small footprints led away, straight toward the open gate. Nora followed the prints through knee-deep snow, her lantern throwing a trembling halo of light. The storm roared around her, but the path was clear, the steps too measured, too perfect for a child's. Boone caught up, grabbing her arm. "He's not alone," he shouted over the wind. The prints ahead had doubled. Larger, booted, and lead side by side toward the tree line. Nora's voice broke. "He took his hand," she said. Boone's eyes filled with snow and something worse. Understanding. When they reached the trees, the storm went silent all at once. Boone raised his rifle, heart pounding, but saw only a figure ahead, cloaked in frost, motionless. As they drew closer, the truth hollowed them. The figure wore a soldier's coat, face pale as ice, eyes black with frozen soil. Sam stood beside him, unharmed, staring up as if listening. The ghost's head turned slowly toward Ward, who had followed in the dark, and with a breath that cracked the air itself, the thing whispered, "You left us behind." Then the world vanished in white. When the storm passed, the fort stood still beneath a lid of gray sky. The footprints led back through the open gate, but Sam was nowhere to be found. Nora clutched his small mitten in both hands, eyes raw from crying. Ward said nothing, only turned toward the barracks where the walls were slick with thawing frost. Boone followed him inside, jaw clenched tight. "You knew this was coming," Boone said. Ward's silence broke like ice. "They warned me before we built," he whispered. "But I built anyway." Inside the barracks, the air hung wet and cold. Frost melted in rivulets down the timbers, leaving black streaks like tears. The men gathered around Ward, faces gaunt, waiting for orders that wouldn't come. Pike spoke first, voice hoarse. "You brought this here, Captain. You built on their bones." Ward didn't argue. "It was meant to last," he said softly. Boone spat on the floor. "Then let it end with us." The rafters groaned above, as if agreeing. That night, the lanterns refused to stay lit. Each time a flame caught, a whisper snuffed it out. Boone and Pike tried to bar the windows, but the sound of boots echoed again, circling, faster, louder. Nora stood in the doorway, her voice steady. "You can't fight what isn't angry," she said. "They just want to be remembered." Ward turned toward her, eyes hollow. "Then what are we?" he asked. "The ones who forgot," she answered. The floorboards buckled as if the fort itself exhaled. Ward fell to his knees, clutching the earth. Through the storm-warped boards, a cold blue light began to seep upward. Soft, pulsing, endless. Boone stumbled back, rifle slipping from his hands. Pike screamed, but the sound died mid-breath as the light touched him, freezing him mid-motion, eyes wide in awe. Ward whispered to the ground, "I remember you." The walls began to tremble. Outside, the roof cracked with the weight of unseen feet. The air filled with murmurs, dozens of voices rising together, not in rage, but in mourning. Ward rose slowly, shoulders straight, face calm at last. "Let them through," he said. Boone hesitated, then lowered his rifle. The fort shuddered one final time as the wind pushed through the gate, sweeping over them like breath from the earth itself. When it passed, the voices were gone and Ward's boots were left standing where he'd been. Dawn came pale and thin, the storm finally dead. The air inside Fort Kettering hung motionless, and for the first time in weeks, the roof was silent. Boone stepped into the courtyard, boots crunching softly over frozen earth. Ah! The fort looked smaller now, gentler, as though the land itself had sighed in relief. Nora emerged behind him, wrapped in Ward's coat, her eyes searching the snow for any trace of him. All she found were two sets of footprints, one leading out beyond the gate, and one leading back to nothing at all. Pike was the first to speak that morning, voice hoarse and small. "It's quiet," he said, as if afraid to disturb it. Boone looked up at the roof. No sound, no shadow, no frost but the clean white of new snow. Nora nodded slowly. Maybe they finally rested. Pike crossed himself, and the three stood without words as the wind swept through the open gate, carrying only the faint scent of pine. Nora went to the schoolroom one last time. The soot drawings were gone, the walls clean, except for one small handprint, Same's, faint and gray against the wood. She laid his mitten beneath it and smiled through tears. The silence felt different now, warm somehow, like breath after a long cry. Boone appeared at the doorway, hat in hand. "Well, bury the captain by the east wall," he said gently, facing the morning. Nora nodded. "He'd like that," she whispered. By noon, the fort's remaining men gathered by the east wall. They laid Ward's boots at the base of a wooden cross Boone had carved himself. No words were spoken. None seemed right. As the snow began to fall again, Nora lifted her face to the sky, letting the flakes melt on her lashes. Somewhere high above, a single thump sounded against the roof, soft, almost curious, like the echo of a memory that refused to die. That night, the wind returned, gentle, steady, carrying no whispers this time. Nora tucked herself beside the hearth, eyes half closed, listening. For a moment she thought she heard laughter, soft and distant, drifting down from the rafters above. It was a child's voice, bright as spring. She smiled, not in fear but in peace. Outside, the snow fell evenly across the roof, erasing the last footprints of Fort Kettering.